You're listening to Protect It All, where Aaron Crow expands the conversation beyond just OT, delving into the interconnected worlds of IT and OT cybersecurity. Get ready for essential strategies and insights. Here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Awesome. Welcome to the show, another show of Protect It All podcast. This is a special episode. I usually do these one-on-one, but today I have Matt and Jay with me today. We're going to talk about a conference that you guys started, but let's just kick it off. Matt, why don't you tell us who you are, a little bit about your background, and then Jay, we'll kick it over to you to kind of do the same, and then we'll get into the other fun stuff.
Sure. My name's Matthew Miller. I go by Matt or whatever. I'm a veteran of the United States Navy, spent some time with special operations and did a lot of CNO operations. And then when I got out, I switched to be a software developer where I focus on kind of the offensive side of security and also do some vuln research as well. And recently started a con, but we'll get into that later.
All right. What about you, Jay?
So I kind of had a different path. I started off with a finance education and realized I didn't like any of that. So I had always played, computer games. I was a 14-year-old managing a TeamSpeak server, things like that. So I was like, okay, well, I really liked my computer science classes, the electives I took in college. So I doubled down on all that and ended up doing a little bit of consulting as the risk side of things. So understanding it from the management perspective. I got bored, went to graduate school because I wanted to do research, did defensive operations for a little while, touched a little bit of offensive tooling, and then moved full-time into research. So for the last 5 years or so, I've been doing DARPA style, advanced research types of things. And it's just been an absolute blast. So that's kind of where I come from and where I've been. And I ran into Miller somewhere along the way.
I was about to say, so how did you guys meet? What is that story?
We were doing contracting for the same customer, and I was mostly remote, but my on-sites would travel to the DC area, and got to know Jay. He worked for an adjacent team, I guess competence met competence.
Yeah, I remember we would take breaks and go for a walk around the building because that's what you do. So we were taking a break one day and we're walking around the building, and I think the words "Did we just become best friends?" were uttered, and that was the hard confirm on something that was already brewing.
Right. Yeah, the stepbrothers. Did we just become best friends? Yeah,
I think we just became best friends.
So let's. Why don't we kick it off next? Just kind of what is ResetCon and kind of walk through high level. What's the focus of it?
So ResetCon at a high level is. Matt and I were a little disappointed. We had been going to conferences our entire careers, more or less. And we had noticed a distinct change in the focus of the conferences away from the deep research and the stuff that you would hear at an Infiltrate back in the day, or, early DEF CON, the Sky Talks. And we would go to these conferences, and there'd always be a few really good talks, but a lot of them were defensive oriented or they were management oriented, and they didn't have those really good, interesting, wow, that's so cool kind of through lines. And we were like, we want our conference, or we want a conference to deliver that to people so that people have this opportunity to sort of feel that wonder that we felt. And simultaneously, we're existing at a point in time in history where there's a lot of focus being given on, operational technology, ICS, but not necessarily a lot of defensive focus, right? So, we see things happening across, East Asia, things in the Ukraine area, perhaps, where there are a lot of attacks and a lot of things happening that aren't necessarily tailored towards defense, but are instead kind of pointed at the populace. You know,
Right.
you're preventing people from getting what they need. And that is a tactic to like wear down an opposing force. And we're seeing that be used. And I don't know, I can't speak for Matt, but personally, like the global economy and protecting that for whatever that may mean, you know, and the people who are not directly involved seems important.
Yeah.
So we're trying to bring both the interest in the research and novel exploitation and then a little bit of focus in this area that's a little under, it doesn't quite get as many eyes as it needs. And we're trying to do that at the same time.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes sense. It's an interesting space. I mean, we right now, especially this week, right? We're in the middle of in the United States, we're in the middle of a presidential election. We just had an assassination attempt. We had this big CrowdStrike issue that came across, which wasn't exactly a cyber issue, but still it's an impact in operational technology. And it just really showcases, you know, it lifts the curtain for the general populace. It's incredible. I was at a couple of family functions in the last couple of days, and I've been cybersecurity and a technology nerd my entire life, basically. But now all of these normies, the people that are not in this space, right, are coming up to me and asking me all these questions and think it's just like my mother-in-law is listening to my podcast. Like, it's really weird that my mother-in-law wants to listen to a cybersecurity focused podcast and is interested in the things because it's getting thrown in everybody's faces. So all this stuff is there, and it's more needed now than ever. It's maybe not more needed. It's probably always been needed. It's just more people understand how needed it is. And then it's getting more and more attacked. So what I heard you say then is this ResetCon is really focused on deep dive into the technical aspects of how, when, why, all those things around OT, ICS, critical infrastructure, critical manufacturing, et cetera. Is that right?
Exactly. And also, you know, as you mentioned, a lot of these attacks are happening. There's a big intersection between the IT and the cybersecurity space and the OT space, especially with like the manufacturing 4.0 push, like the smart manufacturing and, you know, smart devices, autonomous vehicles, all these different things that are now merging the two, where one was previously analog and totally separate. Mm-hmm. Now you have this very tight meshing, where previously an IT system might go down, the OT can still run because Jerry, the intern's pulling the lever.
Right.
But now if that system goes down, like you mentioned with CrowdStrike, well, there's a lot of stuff that governs the OT now sitting in that IT space. So It isn't just the ICS material, but also those like sensors and architectures that are shared across them.
Yeah.
Yeah. Something I'll add to something Jay said a while ago was in the military, we call this irregular warfare or multi-domain warfare, where you leverage, you take advantage of weaknesses in infrastructure or civilian populace in order to soften the target before a conventional invasion. I think we all have seen recent examples of that in many areas, but it's kind of funny. We call it irregular warfare, but it's becoming more and more regular. So I think this style of conflict is definitely going to become mainstay.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I see a lot of arguments, even with this CrowdStrike or any number of others. Was this a cyber attack? Was this an OT incident? Like, you know, and a lot of the vendors are having those conversations or either side of the coin. But what difference does it make? At the end of the day, all that matters is this stuff went down. Like, was it a bad actor? Maybe, maybe not. But at the end of the day, the output, the income, the output, the results was the same. Planes weren't flying. Airports were closed down. People were stranded. You know, all of those things happened. Like, how it happened, was it a nation state attack, or was it just an intern that did something stupid? Who cares? I mean, we care. We need to do a root cause on it eventually, but right now I need to get it back up and running.
My family asked a bunch of the same questions about the Baltimore, Francis Scott Key Bridge.
Yep.
And like the speculation on Twitter.
Yep.
The speculation from my family. The speculation everywhere was, you know, it was a perfect storm of cyber attack, and wouldn't it be funny? Maybe. I mean,
right.
maybe it was just negligence and the fact that a company wasn't taking care of their equipment, and then the perfect series of events happened.
Occam's razor.
To your point, yeah, exactly. To your point, it's the same effect.
Yeah.
So I mentioned that I did defensive stuff for a little while, and I had a mentor who I'm not in as good of touch with as I should be. He did a phenomenal job. And one thing that he said early on when I was still in the defense side of things was, attribution is the most dangerous activity. Right. Because we have all these things to deal with, but everyone wants to think about who done it and why.
Right.
And you absolutely get to that at some point, but right now we have a system that we don't know the status of. We need to be focused on this. We need to get it back cleaned up and running, because what is our deliverable at the end of the day? Yeah. Our deliverable is systems that people can use. And if you're a large, logistics supplier, major shipping, for instance, the last thing you want is to have people spending all this time speculating and pay into that instead of just solving the problem as fast as you can.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's all these talking heads. It's the same thing you see with everything, right? Is who's to blame? What was the cause? Again, at the end of the day, these companies only care about getting their thing, they want to fly. They want to build their widgets. They want to produce electricity. At the end of the day, that's the goal, right? We can figure out the RCA later. So this is awesome. So how do you guys go from walking around the building to having these conversations to becoming best friends to all of a sudden let's launch a con? And what was that process?
I think the big one was kind of like you said earlier. It was a couple buddies over beers.
Yeah.
Or many beers. But eventually we kind of just got to the point where we realized that as we like to call it critical infrastructure. Yep. How is it that critical infrastructure is never represented by more than a village at a conference? And not to say that the village is not any good. It's great. Most of the villages are great. But it's kind of time we started focusing an entire conference on these kind of core issues of addressing the attack surface of an entire nation. And that's really what it came down to was, just a couple buddies having beers, making a great idea, and then having the ability to just say, okay, so how do we do this? And we just started the ball rolling, and it's been a nightmare ever since.
It really has been. And I think Matt phrased it really well. There was kind of this moment of either both the technical focus, both the impact focus. We had aired these, not grievances, but these wants, right? Sure. The things that we wanted. We want to see this more in conferences. This really should be focused on a little bit more, We kept having these wants, and we kept seeing the industry basically every year when we had the same conversation moving a little bit further from where we wanted it to start moving. So we kind of looked at each other across our beers and we're like, well, shoot, I guess it's us then, right? And we kind of called our own number, and, we've regretted it ever since.
Nobody's coming to save you, right? You got to do it yourself, right? If you want it done, it's got to get done. It's the same adage that we see, we've got to step up and do something. So obviously, as you know, I'm big part of ICS Village. I speak at conferences with them. I volunteer all the time. I do podcast episodes with them. There's all sorts. And why do I have a podcast? Why do I do this myself? My job is full enough, but doing this is for that exact reason, right? I want to continue to point that conversation back and do more, right? Because we need more focus. ICS Village is awesome, to Matt's point earlier, but a lot of times they're in the corner of a conference that is not focused on them, right? You have to come search that out. And it's a small section in this one bigger, larger thing, which is not a bad thing. Again, I'm going to Black Hat. I'm going to DEF CON, I'm at RSA and S4 and all these different conferences are great. No shade on them whatsoever, but that's not their focus. You go to Black Hat. What is Black Hat? We know Black Hat is commercial, see whatever the newest thing is and get a bunch of swag and be in Vegas and drink a lot, right? Parties, vendor support, all that kind of stuff. DEF CON, the anti-conference, again, started out being very technical. it's so large now. I don't know how many people are even technical there. Like some of them are just, they want to go because they want to hang out, which is fine too. Like I love DEF CON. I'll be at DEF CON this year, but I love the idea of a hyper focused, technical focused ICS industry because it's such a small niche, but it is so by name critical, that we understand and focus on it because I want my lights to work. I want my water to turn on. I want to be able to get on an airplane and know it's safe. I want to be able to go to the airport and get on my plane and not have blue screens of death everywhere that we see, right? Like all of these things are super critical. And we know from an insider perspective, there's a single domino that can fall and can have this giant spread. Again, CrowdStrike, not to beat up on CrowdStrike, but little things make big impacts in these environments. The consequences are huge, which is why I love the fact that this is dedicated and focused on critical infrastructure.
Well, there are kind of two things that I really like about our approach, just kind of to repeat kind of what you said.
Yeah.
But by giving people, you mentioned that you guys, ICS Village, you're at, DEF CON, Black Hat, RSA, and that's super important because without your presence, nobody could see it. There are a lot of people who would never see it and say, oh, wait, what? Like, that's actually really cool. You get that first checkpoint. You get that first interest. But now that we also have something that's a little bit more dedicated and a little bit more focused, the people who are coming just to hang out, come on, come show up, because not only will you see, like, you will get to see what you saw at ICS Village at DEF CON, you will also get to see it like drilled down at like it's at its depths. Come see how deep does the well go? Like, come see. And literally, come see. And whether it's your area of focus, fantastic, contribute, or you're just there to learn, it gives people that sort of that platform to really just be focused on it. And I think that's what we're most excited about.
No, I love that. That's it's so needed. And to your point, right, is there aren't enough of people focused on it in general. We hear all the time where there's a skills gap. There's a need for resources that have the skill. You look at LinkedIn, you looked at job requests, and people are asking for, somebody that's got, the unicorn, somebody that's got 20 years experience in something that hasn't even been around that long. Like, I've been doing critical infrastructure, cybersecurity stuff way longer than it's actually been called that. But there aren't many people that have, right? And I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just actually saying why there's gray in my beard, right? It's because exactly. But we need more folks. We need new blood. We need to understand. And the more that what I love about critical infrastructure, one of the main things I love, and coming from a power utility and critical manufacturing, the way I generate electricity is not proprietary, right? From company A to company B, we do it the same. It's not the secret, recipe for Coke. There's no secret here, right? We can share. So there's a lot of sharing that goes on in that industry and a lot of these critical infrastructures, because the way I do my water is not this. That's not how they make their money. Their IP is not around how I generate or how I create this thing. It's more just around brand, and I need to go buy and provide, it's more the coverage than it is the IP on it. What that allows us to do is actually share and have some conversations where I may not be able to do that between Pepsi and Coke. But even those industries are able to say, here's how I'm protecting my manufacturing without releasing the secret sauce to my recipe, how I create an assembly line. We can share that stuff because there's not as much. And how do I make sure that my brand is okay? And those are the bigger conversations that we can have and deep dive into the technology side of things, because how do we solve, like, being able to look at the CrowdStrike incident? How do we solve that in the future? How do we make sure that doesn't happen again? It wasn't a cyber issue. It wasn't a nation state attack, but to Matt's point earlier, it could have been. So how do we make sure that isn't used in the future? Because now our adversaries just saw, oh, wow, one product just took down all of these critical infrastructures. Maybe we should use that as an idea on how we could use that in the future.
Yeah, that's been a huge part of like any supply chain attack.
Yeah.
You swim far enough upstream and all of a sudden the trickle down effect is massive.
Yeah, absolutely.
One of the things that we really like about the ICS space and the OT space, And one of the reasons I personally am so excited about the conference, you mentioned finding the solutions and sharing the solutions. There are a lot of research groups in like academia and universities that either know or may not know that some of the work they're doing is like critically relevant.
Sure.
And there's kind of a bit of a disconnect at the moment between like pure, like the research that I was doing in DARPA land and like applicability in the field, right? So there's always kind of been a disconnect there. But if we look just in the last year or so of research, we can see that the solutions and some of this sharing, it can already go on. There are groups out there that are working on, ICS systems that really should probably know about like voltage fault injection. Right. And what can it do at its, like we're fortunate to have Colin O'Flynn as one of our speakers, kind of one of the not granddaddy, he's not old, but one of the fathers of this area. And, he's got new AE and the chip shouter, chip whisperer, all that great stuff that he puts out. And he loves his hardware, but like, the oops, I glitched it again paper that came out. That came out and they're performing multiple fault injections on a single trigger. That's something that might not be relevant to everybody, but on those people who are using like ARM trust zone chips, well, ARM's pretty prevalent. Mm-hmm. So maybe, if those researchers got to sit down with, I don't know, let's pick a firm, right? Like some large manufacturer who just has a bunch of ARM. Well, what are you manufacturing? Well, we're pressing like airplane components.
Right.
That's a big deal. Like maybe you should be aware, so whether it ends up funding it or I talked about airplane components. So you have CAN bus, which is how vehicles communicate,
Yep.
Who knows that better than Aaron Crow?
Yeah.
No one probably. So, they've got this research coming out that's focused on CAN bus, both on like using like the interframe spaces to create a signature and like time trapping of injected attacks with like 100% and like replay attacks with like 100% success rate. I think that was ZB scan. And then Redis that came out. And I'm pretty sure that's like, they keep track of like the transmit error counters and they kind of emulate it. And they use that to like, they can inject bits into things that they think are wrong, create a faulty message, put the attacker device into an error state, and then they can scan through and say, okay, here is the device that we think is the problem, talking about attribution, right?
Right.
And how hard that can be in the ICS space. So this is stuff that came out in the last year, I guess. They were pre-publication like a year ago. There are a lot of groups that could probably use that.
Yeah.
That fund this lab. Go find these guys, email them, talk to them. They did great work, and they can contribute immediately right now. Maybe not to your in production systems, but to getting this forward and then getting those solutions out. It doesn't have to be a decade. It can be a couple years.
Well, I just spent time at and I just spent time at Idaho National Labs and they have their cyber informed engineering, and that's really the idea behind that, right? Is I need to be thinking about these things and what are my risks and where are my vulnerabilities, and it's not always a software vulnerability, right? It's all it's not software bill of materials. Sometimes it's a lot of different things, and there's a lot of perspectives there. We do really well at designing these systems and critical infrastructure to be reliable, to be available. But we haven't been designing them with the cyber and technology aspect as part of the equation. We kind of bolt it on after the fact. We try to figure it out. And even when we do that, we're not bringing in the best of the best. We're making your plumber figure out the electrical, right? Yeah, he's a smart guy. He can probably figure it out, but that's not what he went to school with. That's not his expertise. Can he do it? He's a super smart guy. He's done it before. Yeah, he probably can, but that's not his job. Like, bring in the electrician, bring in the specialist, the HVAC guy. Can your electrician wire your HVAC? Yes. But is he as good as the HVAC guy that's all he does and that's all he's ever done? And he's seen all these different examples and the do's and don'ts. Of course not. Like that's the specialty side of it. And we need to make sure that all those people are at the table.
Yeah. That was one of the goals with ResetCon, was to get all these people together, was to get money from vendors together with the brains behind some of these research projects, together with the offensive security minded people, and just brainstorm solutions to these problems, because you're not going to do it anywhere else unless you have a shop that's got all of those components, in the mixing bowl. So we have to do it at a conference. We have to do it, where, everybody's willing to talk and discuss. And so we started ResetCon.
So who's your ideal audience? Like, who do you want to show up? Obviously, from a vendor perspective, from a speaker, you've already talked about some of the speakers there, but just normal audience. Like, who are those ideal folks, and what goal do you want to come out of this from them, from an individual as an attendee, but also from a larger community of, hey, this ResetCon thing, we went away, and what can we say we want to get, like, in 5 years, at year 5 of this thing, what is a good outcome that you guys are hoping to get to?
We have a couple different audiences, and I think that's why this conference is particularly ponderous. We have the exploiters, like the on keyboard operators who, could benefit from understanding, like, oh, there's this whole space to play in. And, your offensive people, your red teamers, those guys. We also have the defensive people who are in the ICS space, who are dedicated security people. Of course, those are our security audiences, but It's more than that, because if you look and you go into actual industry, you have the people who are managing these whole, like an oil platform, right? Mm-hmm. You have the guys who run that, not necessarily day to day, but the decision makers who can sit down and look at the problems at hand and say, hey, we do LiDAR sensing. There is an attack out that allows, called "You Can't See Me," that explicitly uses lasers to prevent LiDAR from reflecting back, and you can target it, and it's like 92.7% effective at removing 90% of, like, the LiDAR pillars.
Sure.
That's a lot. That's a problem. So the cyber people, they can understand and know, like, ooh, we can use this to make the car crash, right?
Right.
But the guy making the car fundamentally has to be aware that this is a possibility.
Sure.
And now that he's aware that it's a possibility, he can go focus on that. So we have also, like, executive level and like technology decision makers from industry. And those are two very different groups. Right. They're very hard to get together because they don't like the same things. And we're finding that now,
Yeah. They are different, but they are, at the end of the day, and it's one of the things I say a lot is we're on the same team, right? We have different roles and we have different specialties, but we all want to make sure, again, I said it a minute ago, I want to make sure when I turn my light switch on that it works, right? And most people don't understand the complexity it takes to generate, transmit, and distribute electricity or water or gas or our electric system. Like, all of these things, they're just so difficult and complex. Most people just take it for granted. They pay their light bill, they turn their light on, and it just works, right? And really understanding that we're on the same team. We have the same goal. IT and OT, we're not on different sides. Executives and the people hands on keyboard, we have the same goals, right? Everybody wants to have a safe environment that their kids can go to school, that we can, invest in real estate or invest in stocks or buy whatever we want and do our job and retire and go on vacation and all these types of things. And all those things are dependent upon this foundation of critical infrastructure and everything that it works and all the subcomponents. And we're not asking everyone to understand all of that stuff. You don't need your offensive lineman to necessarily be able to play, safety. But they at least need to understand a little bit, because we are on the same team. Like, we need to have a general awareness of certain things, especially if it's your job to do whatever that task is, to defend against whatever, or to be offensive on it, depending on what your role is. So when did y'all start this thing? Like, how long ago did you start kicking this off and turn this into something that's tangible?
I think we founded the company that holds the conference 18 months ago.
Oh, wow.
No, a year ago. Even less. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
So 1 year from foundation to the conferences in, a little over a month and a half, 2 months.
Yeah. So we had been thinking about it before, but our official incorporation date is this month. Like this is our year anniversary.
Yeah.
That's epic.
The ball has been rolling for about 18 months, like officially though.
Sure.
Yeah.
We're constructing a plan and figuring out names and getting a logo built and buying domains about 18 months ago. But yeah, incorporation is not today, but this month is certainly kind of a monument, I guess.
I think it was actually the 6th of July. We had submitted it on the 3rd, but there were like some issues with our submitter, so I just had to do it myself a few days later. One of the things, I'd also want to shout out, I don't know how familiar you are with ShmooCon and the Shmoo group. Mm-hmm. Shout out Heidi Potter. She got on the phone with us at the outset, and we presented her with our timeline and our plans. And she kind of validated and helped us orient and said, like, well, move this one up here, change this around. You need at least this much time for, and that kind of guidance, as much as we either succeeded or failed to adhere to it, was very helpful.
Sure.
So, shout out the Shmoo group.
That's excellent. I've experienced a lot of, again, going back to that whole we're all one team. We're not a competition. Like having more focused and different is not bad, right? There's a lot of conferences out there, but there's a reason they stood up, and there's a reason their purpose. They're, at least when they started, right? So I'm excited about this. I'm excited to have another opportunity to speak about ICS. There is so few that really have any significant focus on critical infrastructure, specifically around, the technology side of things, right? All of them will have a talk track maybe, or maybe they've got a few speakers there. ICS Village will be there. Other villages will be there, but actually having a focus on it. S4, obviously focuses on critical infrastructure. But again, even that, it's less on the technical side. I mean, they do definitely have talks. I love S4. It's one of my favorite conferences. But still having one that's even more focused, down in the weeds is not a bad thing. And it's good that we have diversity of thought. We have diversity of attendees. And not everybody can go to S4 for many reasons, right? Miami's expensive and all the different things, or I couldn't go this month, right? So having another place that I can go and be able to expand and deeper dive with different people, and having the same conversation around different people, I'll have a different outcome of my opinion, or maybe even outcome of thought and results, which is incredibly powerful.
I'm personally really excited, not just about having the focus on ICS, but also going the other direction. One thing that I think gets lost a lot, I was at Hack the Capitol. I got to, I was fortunate to be on Derek Harp's podcast. It was fun to talk to him. And, we have a lot, there is some focus in the ICS space, but some of what's missed isn't just the lack of focus directly in the ICS space. It's the cross-domain applicability.
Sure.
So consider actually one of our other speakers, Daniel Genkin. Let me ring the bell. He worked on something last year that was focused on off-path USB injection attacks. Well, as USB, that's just a pretty general compute. We use it everywhere. But where it gets used a lot? Air gap systems. Yeah. So we have, he put together with, not alone, he and like his co-authors put together an attack that allows command injection, keystroke injection, and like file rewriting. You plug in that USB, you think you know what's on the files, the configuration that you're uploading into your system, and it writes something totally different. It's issued commands. It's been completely hijacked. And if you're focused entirely, purely on operational technology, you might not see that hole in the USB driver, but we have the opportunity as just generalists and cyber focused people to say, here's the hole in the USB driver. Look where your USB driver is.
Yeah.
So I think going the other direction also has a real broadening effect that I think we can see, or that I really hope to see come out of Reset.
No, that's huge, right? And I've seen this firsthand in nuclear power plants, for instance, where, completely air gapped, no network connection whatsoever. And a vendor brings in a drive that's been scanned and all the things, and everything looked fine on it. And it gets brought in and it causes an issue. And this was 2010. So that this is not new. You look at Stuxnet air gap system, right? That whole environment. And that's where we get to, we have this false sense of security because of the way that we architect or these systems are, and they're not necessarily there. So what is the day? What can you expect is when you're showing up? Like what are the talks? What are the hands-on? What are the kind of walk us through that expectation of when I'm showing up to this place as whatever my role may be in my corporate world.
You want me to take that?
Matt, you want to give us that?
Yeah. So like any conference, you're gonna walk in and get registered. You're gonna trade in your barcode or your ticket for a badge.
Yep.
And then we'll have some opening remarks. Some really high technical talks. A couple villages have committed to coming. It's really just going to be focused, like Jay mentioned, on some really specific research. There's going to be a floor for vendors, to advertise for themselves for being at the conference, maybe do some recruiting. And there will be spaces for people to have conversations, get to know each other, socialize. So outside of the conference floor, there's the rest of Savannah to explore, which is a great city. Plenty of good food, good drinks, good sightseeing, lots of American history. And there's plenty to do there. But at the conference, it's going to be structured a lot like most other conferences, with talks. We have a CTF that we're putting together that's focusing on a lot of industrial control system aspects. We've got some emulated PLCs, some DNP3 stuff for people to attack. There's going to be no shortage of activities, and it's a 5-year goal of mine to have something really special on the floor. I don't know if it's going to be an aircraft engine or maybe a mock-up of a maritime control system network. It would be really cool to have like a miniature reactor or a mock-up of a power plant available on the floor, and just let people go at it, kind of like the car hacking village started. They put like the dash of a car on the floor and said, "Go nuts."
Have fun.
Yeah, that's kind of my 5-year goal. I'm hoping we can get there eventually. Savannah's pretty uniquely positioned. There's the port of Savannah nearby. It would be really awesome to get like a busload of hackers onto a ship,
right?
And you can kind of see where that might go. There's going to be a lot of fun to be had, a lot of learning to be had, a lot of networking to be had. And hopefully get researchers, vendors, and hackers thinking along the same lines. And like Jay mentioned earlier, maybe we can get some of this really cool research funded and implemented before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, I love that. Anything to add, Jay?
The only thing I wanted to add was when we were out there having our beers and getting the conference, like kind of walking the grounds of where we were going to be, Matt had that idea. He was like, well, what if we just like got a boat and like everybody could get on the boat? And I was like, how would that work? And he described the bus, and I was like, well, I guess like if they wanted, they could just have sleeping pads and a sleeping bag, and they could just sit in there and just go nuts. Yeah. So long as like, I don't know, insert shipping company name here was okay with, having something import and then reflashing their systems afterwards. Right. That would be quite the experience. I think that would be an amazing 5-10 year goal. I think my ultimate goal is, as Matt said, which is to see some of this research, to see some of these labs connect with industry and actually, not just for the sake of getting funding, but to actually deliver something.
Yeah.
Imagine a track on your CTF being, steal the boat.
Right.
Not really. We would have probably like exemplar systems that are just physically located on the boat.
Right.
But, being immersed in that environment and being told that you can steal the boat would be incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. It brings up something that is near and dear to my heart. And I've built a lot of very large labs for power utilities and others, and they're purpose built, right? So they have control systems, they've got turbo controls and balance of plant and the transmission substation environments, all that kind of stuff. But they're special built for those, whatever they're using them for. Imagine if that was available to this environment, right? So a bunch of people are coming together, not to just break stuff because it's fun, but also just find things that nobody else thought of, to find fixes, to find solutions, to find new architectures and capabilities. When we put our minds together, it's amazing what we can come up with. But you can't go buy, I don't have the money to go buy a control system or recreate a power plant in my lab. Like I've got a lab over there that I'll actually be bringing, but it's small and it's a small use case. But imagine if I had all of the access to an entire environment, and those labs exist. Like again, I've built 2 or 3 myself, and that's in public companies, not counting the ones that are in these lab environments like Idaho National Labs and NREL and MXD up in Chicago for manufacturing. A lot of those labs have a lot of these spaces, but they don't necessarily have people that are coming in to do this type of thing. So I love the idea. I think more insight and visibility into these environments where, unfortunately, up until now, critical infrastructure has kind of been this security by obscurity. I don't know what's going on. That's my security. Don't look behind here. Everything's good. Just trust me. And I think now we're in a space where we know that's not enough. And it's not going to help us. And we need to get some young blood. We need to get some hackers in here, not because we want them to break stuff, but because by them breaking something, it can help us fix something before that bad thing, before the bus hit or the boat hits the bridge, before, all the power plants go down or that type of attack happens in a bad thing that we don't know how to recover from. Absolutely. I love it, gentlemen. All right. So give us the call to action. How do people buy tickets? How do they, if I'm a sponsor, who I reach out to? Like, give us all that info.
Yeah, so ResetCon, rstcon.org. We've got a sponsorship page if you want to sponsor us. All the tiers and information about how to submit to be a sponsor is on that page. Call for papers is open at the CFP page. Again, everything's listed there. We've got a lot of interesting categories and interesting calls for papers. And then the 2024 page is kind of where we're putting all of our sponsors and kind of our headline speakers. And then there's a couple different places to buy tickets on the 2024 page. On the tickets page, you can reach out to us directly for group rates if there's a big group that wants to come and you want a group rate. And then also there's student pricing available. So students just get a flat 50% off. So it's $100 for a student to show up.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Our CFP, it is still open. We have some really good talks lined up already, but I want to impress upon people that the thing that they're working on at home might be more applicable than they think. I referred to the USB thing, talked about like LiDAR, if automated patching in main memory, maybe you're doing something that's on a RISC-V system. Those are everywhere. There's a lot of RTOS stuff. There's a lot of embedded stuff that is now in all of these industries that wasn't necessarily before. So don't be gun shy just because you're like, well, I did this thing, but it's really just focused on like Wi-Fi or like this Zigbee or a TLS connection. it's probably relevant. You'd be surprised how much of how much overlap there is. And every time I sit down with like a student or a professor, I've had some opportunities recently to like talk with industrial and like systems engineering groups. And sometimes they're like, yeah, well, we're working on optimization. Right. That's relevant to us. And like, well, how is optimization relevant to you guys? I say, well, Daniel Gruss, another one of our speakers, he's bringing Suit, which is he and Jonas Ufinger are bringing and discussing Suit, which is like they did a whole attack based on undervolting, right? We talked about fault injection before, undervolting, you know, and they've realized while they were undervolting that a lot of these things run more efficiently, or they run just as efficient, they run just as correctly at lower voltages. And you, as a manufacturer or as an embedded system user, can actually undervolt things to a certain threshold. Make sure you test it first and save on your power bill by like double-digit percents. Yeah. So optimization, it might not seem relevant. It is relevant. So please, even if it's just an abstract, our submission is not that ponderous. Just send it out there. It could end up being big. Go for it.
The other thing I'll mention about the CFP is there are timelines on there, but us being a new conference, still trying to figure out schedules and all that stuff. Even if you have something that's a little bit late, just get us an abstract, and we can help work with you on getting the rest of the research done and figuring it out. Our timeline, at least for the CFP, is pretty soft. So even if it's a week late, we'd still love to hear from you.
Sure.
As it stands now, the CFP is due to close on August 1st. We plan to leave the page up there. So again, if it's a couple weeks, a week or 2, 3 weeks late, still shoot us a spot or an email, and we'll see what we can do.
Yeah, what's the worst that can happen? You know, well, it'll take time to review everything. So while I'm reviewing everything, you might as well slide one in the stack. It's fine.
All right. Exactly.
You know.
That's awesome. Well, I'll definitely make sure all the details are in the show notes, folks. So definitely look there for all the details around those links. Definitely get in your CFP. It's a great opportunity for your career, for networking. Presenting, even if you're uncomfortable. I highly recommend it. Doing podcasts and speaking. There's a soft skill that goes to that is important. It doesn't matter how smart you are. If you can't convince others and explain it to others, then it doesn't matter. And part of that is presenting abstracts, presenting papers, getting up and talking to a group of your peers. We've all been there, right? Nobody's expecting it to be perfect. It doesn't have to be polished. It's better to get the content out there and trip and say, or, be sweaty and not know what to do with your hands and all that kind of stuff. Who cares? Get out there, take the risk. It can greatly impact your career, but beyond that, it can greatly impact this whole critical infrastructure thing. The knowledge that you guys have is what matters. And if it's in your head and you can't get it out there, then it's not helping. We need it out there so that we can do something about it and we can get it, you have a knowledge and then you tell it to Jay and then me, Jay and Matt, and we're all sitting there like, oh, wow, now we can do this other thing that none of us had thought of because now that we have this new information. So it's super important and powerful to get that knowledge out there. Well, thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward. I'm definitely going to be there. I'm actually going to be representing ICS Village. So I'll be bringing this, it's actually in a little bit of construction right now, but the case I have behind me. So definitely come out. We'll have it's got PLC and kind of some secure mode access and some fun stuff that people can actually put hands on. And we'll have, a lot of information around ICS Village if people want to volunteer, all that kind of stuff. So definitely excited to be there. And, obviously, be at the conference and hear the other speaking and all that kind of stuff. So definitely come out, sign up and get there. And it's going to be a lot of fun.
We'll make sure you're not in the corner of this one.
There we go. Thank you, gentlemen.
Take care.
Thanks for joining us on Protect It All, where we explore the crossroads of IT and OT cybersecurity. Remember to subscribe wherever you get your podcasts to stay ahead in this ever-evolving field. Until next time.